Picture this. You're a young woman in the 13th century living near Assisi, and you decide that you want to start living a more devoted life. And you hear about this group that just kind of started called the Poor Ladies of San Damiano, and you're like, I want to give it a shot. I feel like I'll really fit in and it'll help me get what I want. And so you join. And years go by, and you're loving it. You're soaking up all of the faith you can, and you're just really growing spiritually. And during Mass one day, you have to go back to your room and get something. But when you go there, you realize that the abbess is just kind of sitting in her room, but something looks off. And you go to check on her because you want to make sure everything's okay. So you cautiously open the door, and you realize you're just facing a wall. But as you approach, you can see that Mass is being projected onto the wall. You can see it and you can hear it. This is a miracle. Like, this is something unknown, something that wouldn't be known until television came around centuries later. And you just stand there in awe watching. Howdy all, and welcome back to another episode of the Sanctified Podcast, the show where we explore the lives of various saints throughout history, learn about what they did, and how we came to recognize them as saints today. Today, we're going to explore the life of Saint Clare of Assisi, a very faithful woman who started a group that grew into something amazing. Clare was born on July 16th, 1194, in, you guessed it, Assisi. She was the oldest daughter of Favorino and Ortolana Schifi. Her father, Favorino, was the Count of Sassurosso, and he was said to have been the representative of a great Roman family, though the details of who that family was are a little foggy. Her mother was very devoted, and she was actually a member of the family Fiumi, which was a noble family in Italy at the time. So her parents had pretty good political authority and were very well respected. Ever since she was a young girl, Clare devoted herself, like her mom, to prayer. But beyond being a faithful kid and having a faithfully dedicated family, she didn't really have any sort of catalyst to send her into overdrive. And on top of that, her father was actually trying to set up an arranged marriage for her, but she really didn't want anything to do with that. She convinced him, at least, to not force her to marry until she was 18, and he started discussing it when she was 12. So she did a pretty good job convincing him to put it off, and it's a good thing she did. Because little did they know that fate had other plans in store for Clare. In 1212, when Clare was 17, she heard Francis of Assisi preach during a Lenten service at the Church of San Giorgio. She was so moved by what he said, she asked if he would help her live a life more aligned with how the Gospel describes. On Palm Sunday, she left home to go to the chapel of Porciuncula to meet with Francis. And there, Francis cut her hair and gave her a plain robe to wear instead of her luxurious attire and her long hair. And this really symbolizes that she was leaving behind everything she had. Like, her parents could offer her pretty much anything at the time, and it just didn't interest her. She was going to leave it all behind. Her next step was to join the convent of the Benedictine nuns at San Paolo at Bastia. However, her father, worried that his dear daughter ran away or was forced into this life, went to find her there, and he tried to convince her to come back home for her arranged marriage. It was no use. She wanted this life. She told him that, and she told him she wouldn't leave and wouldn't get married to anyone other than Jesus. Not like in the literal sense, but that's what a nun's vows are for, dedicating your life to Christ. In essence, marrying Christ. It's just not what the average Joe would picture in marriage. And because of this little stunt from her father, Clare was worried that her family would try to bring her home again, so she asked to be transferred to a different convent. She moved to Sant'Angelo in Panzo to continue her life in devotion to the Lord. And after a little bit, like just a few weeks really, Clare's sister Caterina joined her at Sant'Angelo. Clare's sister took the name Agnes, and the two lived very devoted lives at the convent, though her father did try to comfort Agnes as well, but same deal happened. She wasn't going to have it. And they made a home there, if you really want to call it that. It was more just a plain living space, and it was built by the Church of San Damiano, and the sisters moved in. As time went on, other women joined them there. All of them shared the same wish to be the bride of Jesus and live very plain lives. They earned the name Poor Ladies of San Damiano. Because of their lifestyle, they lived a very ascetic lifestyle. And yes, this simple way of living was from the teaching of Saint Francis of Assisi. And after a little while, the group was declared a second order. And a second order just identifies them as a community of nuns. A community of monks is considered a first order. So, just how austere was their self-inflicted living conditions? Well, for starters, they wouldn't eat any meat at all. But that's not terrible. I mean, there's vegetarians, all right. They lived in a bare home with minimal furnishings and nothing to keep them particularly comfortable, like literally the bare minimum. They hardly spoke to one another, so you're restricting your diet. You have no comfortable furniture. You can't talk to each other, and shoes weren't allowed. So altogether, that could really take a toll if you weren't dedicated to your cause. So what did they do in their very simple living conditions? Well, they prayed and they did hard manual labor. And that was it. But they were happy because they were brides of Christ, and everything they did kept them close to him or brought them even closer to him. The Poor Ladies of San Damiano grew in number and reputation pretty quickly, actually. The order was overseen by Saint Francis of Assisi himself for a little while. By 1216, when Clare was around 22 years old, she was actually appointed abbess of San Damiano and for her order of nuns. And while Clare was abbess, she protected her sisters from outside attempts to get them to follow the guidance of Saint Benedict instead of Saint Francis. But that wasn't going to happen. Clare was very fond of the Franciscan lifestyle. In fact, she was often referred to as an alternate Francis, or Alter Franciscus at the time. And I want to get into a little more detail about that, but I want to cover one thing quickly. So in 1224, soldiers for Frederick II came to Assisi to attack. Though ill at this time, Clare went out to meet the soldiers who were just outside the city. As she walked out, she held in her hands the Blessed Sacrament. She went to the city wall and placed it right where the enemies could see. She knelt and began praying. She prayed, "O Lord, protect these sisters whom I cannot protect now." And a voice seemingly coming from nowhere and everywhere all at once responded, "I will keep them away, always, in my care." The soldiers were terrified. What did they just witness? Was God about to strike them down for attacking? Immediately, they turned around and fled, because I would do the same thing, honestly. That's a pretty terrifying situation to be in. If you believe in God, it's terrifying, or if you don't, you're like, oh crap, they're right. So Assisi was left untouched. As Francis grew older and weaker, Clare took care of her spiritual guide. Really, at this point, he would have been more of a father figure to her than her actual father was. So it makes sense that she would want to take care of him. But eventually, Francis did pass away, and this was devastating for Clare. She remained steadfast in her practice and in her order. Now, in 1215, so a few years before, about a decade before really, the Fourth Lateran Council said that any new religious community had to adopt a previously established order. In other words, Clare's group was supposed to change to the ways of a different order to honor the rule. But the popes, they kind of asked her to change, but they knew what she was doing. They knew what she was about. They were all right with it. So she kind of just stayed doing it. The popes would be like, hey, can you change? You'd be like, no, I'm doing it right. And for a while, they were like, yeah, okay. And it does take a lot of commitment, because most Catholics today, and many people looking at the Catholic faith from outside, would say that you have to listen to the Pope. You can't go against what the Pope says. But Clare didn't care. She knew she was doing the right thing, and she stood firm in her decision to live that way. And, well, look where she ended up, right? Popes Innocent III and Honorius III were okay with Clare's lifestyle. They would be like, hey, when could you do this? And she was like, no. And she did make rules, and they knew what the rules were, and they were okay with it. Their rules emphasized the non-possession of property. They emphasized service to one another and the Lord, and to live an essentially ascetic lifestyle, though it wasn't called that in her words. But when Gregory IX came to be Pope, he didn't like her. He wanted her to change, but she held out. She was a very determined and strong woman. Years went by, and Clare began to get sick, and she had aches and pains for many years. But she wouldn't let them bother her. She felt that as long as she was faithful and devoted, no pain was too great. And she said, "They say that we are too poor, but can a heart which possesses the infinite God be truly called poor?" So you can see that she was happy with her life, no matter how much discomfort or how much pain she endured, because she always lived in service to God. And eventually, Pope Innocent IV, who finally came into power after Gregory IX, recognized Clare's service and understanding of God. And on August 9th, 1235, he declared that Clare's rule would be the governing rule for her order of poor ladies. But just 2 days later, on August 11th, Clare passed away at 59 years old. Clare's body was kept at the chapel of San Giorgio at first because they were building an entirely new church to house her remains. She just had that much influence. People respected her that greatly. And at the Pope's request, the cause for Clare's canonization began. And just 2 years later, Clare was canonized by the new Pope, Pope Alexander IV. The Basilica of Saint Clare was completed in 1260, and on October 3rd of that year, Clare's body was transferred there. And in 1263, the Order of Poor Ladies had its name changed by Pope Urban IV to the Order of Saint Clare. Now, we know that there's a few requirements to become a saint, and miracles are a big one. So what miracles did Clare perform? Because she was canonized very quickly, so something impressive must have happened. Well, one of the biggest miracles was that she could see Mass and services projected onto her wall from her room when she was too sick to actually go. She was essentially watching a live stream from her room in the 13th century. That is wild. And as word gets out and there are witnesses, it spreads really fast. And that is a pretty unique miracle. We haven't covered another saint yet that has been involved in a miracle like this. We've seen visions, but we've never seen essentially projections onto the wall. And then obviously another miracle was when she scared off the army that was going to invade the city. Like, she prayed and she got an answer immediately. And because of that, she's frequently portrayed holding a monstrance or a pyx in reference to when she brought the Eucharist to the gate of her city and kept it safe. And if you don't know, a pyx is like a small container that is used to hold the Eucharist. It was being kept or transferred outside of a tabernacle, which is the big box that the Eucharist is always kept in when at a Mass or inside a church. And usually like a red candle is lit to indicate if the Eucharist is present in the box, in the tabernacle or not. And then a monstrance is like an adornment to a tabernacle or an altar, and it features the Eucharist within it. Clare's feast day is August 11th. She's the patron saint of eye disease because of the visions that she saw, the projections that she saw. The patron saint of goldsmiths because of the purity that she represented and the necessity for visual focus and attention to detail, which ties back into the projections and visions. For lingerie workers, embroiders, and needle workers, because of the manual labor that she did all of that stuff. And because, again, it's a very hands-on, a lot of that needs like very dexterous, and your eyes have to be very focused. So there's that. And she also became the patron saint of television in 1958 when Pope Pius XII attributed it to her for the records that she could watch Mass and services when she was just sitting in her room, who knows how far away. And today there are numerous places that are actually named in honor of Saint Clare, especially in Spanish-speaking regions. Santa Clara is a city in multiple U.S. states, a city in Cuba, and she has churches around the world that are dedicated to her. And actually something that I thought was really cool was that Christopher Columbus's ship that we know as the Nina was originally named the Santa Clara in honor of Saint Clare. If you have any questions about Saint Clare, please let me know, and I will do my best to answer them. So what are your thoughts of Saint Clare of Assisi? How would you react if you were one of the soldiers that heard that voice speak? I hope you found her story interesting, and I look forward to hearing your thoughts about Saint Clare. Thanks for listening. If you would like to support the channel, you can subscribe, download the episode, like, comment, share it with your friends, or send me a suggestion on a saint that I can check out by emailing me at sanctifiedpodcast@proton.me. You can find the show on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music, Podbean, and more. Just search for the Sanctified Podcast, and I should have a few episodes uploaded on whatever service. Take care, and have a wonderful day.